Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I have great news for you. The second edition of the Codist has just been released, both in Kindle and paperback, and you can get it. It just happened, and I'm excited that this 2-year battle has been won. We are victorious, and it is now available on Amazon. So if you want to know about the weaponization of DNA and what Satan's plan is to wipe out the Jews to keep Jesus from coming back, get your copy of the Codist. And of course, I'm delighted that this past November, we debuted as the #1 new release with the 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. If you go to ignitinganation.com, scroll down to the bottom of the page, input your email address, and you will get a free first chapter of the book. Everybody who's read the first chapter has bought the book. 7 Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life in the Garden of Eden, and that same tree of life that reappears right there on the river of life in the book of Revelation. If you want to understand more about it and its message, this is the book for you. I'm delighted today to have Clayton and Ashley Hurst on with us to talk about their new book, Hope for Your Marriage, Experiencing God's Greatest Desires for You and Your Spouse. Clayton and Ashley are the marriage and parenting pastors at Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. Married for more than 20 years, Clayton and Ashley share a passion to see God breathe life into every couple they encounter, strengthening and enriching their family. They're the parents of 3 children and live in the Houston area. Clayton and Ashley Hurst, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thanks so much for having us. It's an honor to be here.
Yes, absolute honor. Thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. Everybody loves a love story. Everybody loves the backstory. How did you two grow up? How did your lives converge? What was the foundation of faith? Who were the mentors? What was it that you had as your model? And was the model fractured, broken, and 2 broken vessels come together? And we seem to have this myth that says you're the yin to my yang. Where you are strong, I am weak, and where I am weak, you are strong. And we throw that myth out there, and everybody brings their model to the marriage. You are your mother. You are your father. You walk down the stairs saying, I will never be like they. I will never. And you find yourself in this autopilot mode that takes us right back to the good or the bad role models. So whichever one of you wants to take the lead, tell me a little bit about your background and how you two finally met and what you brought to the marriage, keeping in mind that even Delta Airline tells you to check your bags before you come on board.
We should have adopted that model whenever we got married. That's a great line. Our thing was we grew up in 2 small towns in East Texas. We had great models in front of us. My parents, when we got married, had been married over 30 years. Now they've been married 55 years. Ashley's parents, the same, now they've been married over 45 years. My grandparents married over 60 years. So as far as a model goes, we had the best models in front of us. Really never saw our parents argue or complain with each other, really showed love to each other. I think my dad taught me the importance of working hard, the importance of loving one woman, the importance of family. I think Ashley would probably say the same about hers. And
Absolutely.
So I think our thought was whenever we got to the altar, was that, oh, well, we're ready. We've got this under control. Everything's going to be fantastic. And then we said, I do. And it was almost like, okay, well, that's done. Now what? And we prepared for the day, but we didn't really prepare for the days after.
Yeah, I completely agree with Clayton. We both grew up with the assumption that, we had it made. I think we went into marriage with a lot of arrogance. We both thought, oh, this is going to be so easy. Our parents did it. We grew up in this great Christian home. We grew up in church. What else is there to know? And so our arrogance led to a lot of fights and a lot of miscommunication, because we didn't have the knowledge. We didn't have the knowledge we needed, nor the wisdom. There's a scripture in Proverbs that says a house is built on wisdom, and through understanding it is established. And we didn't have the knowledge, we didn't have the understanding or the wisdom to build that house.
A good friend of ours who has, we have a segment we run every month on Wednesday at noon, on the first Wednesday of every month, and it's called the No Regrets Hour. And she wrote she wrote a book and the title of the book is "If My Husband Would Just Change, I Would Be Happy." And then the subtitle is "And Other Myths That Wives Believe," because we come into this saying that I've found my soul mate.
Yeah.
That is the worst possible connection to make with somebody, is a soulish connection. First of all, that's mind, will, and flesh.
Right.
That is not spirit. I want to meet my spiritual mate. I want to meet the one that binds me together with that cord of 3 strands. That's who I want to meet. And so she has taken this concept of can you live a marriage with no regrets? Can you live a life with no regrets? And should that be a goal? And that should be a goal. As a matter of fact, you start out in your counseling sessions with a question, right from the very beginning.
Yeah, and it's really the question that kind of shook us to our core. After 5 years of kind of walking down this valley into hopelessness, we didn't take leaps and bounds, but it was just small steps that we took every day. It was sitting down and kind of hearing it inside of our heart and saying, are you willing to do whatever it takes to have the marriage you've always hoped and dreamed of? And really that talks about pride. That talks about your willingness to lay your pride down, to lay your choices down. Are you willing to treat her differently than the way you've been treating her? Are you willing to love her regardless how you feel? And so all those things kind of, that question really began our turning point, and we felt like that was a great question to start our book off with.
Yeah, and we realized we hadn't done everything. It was year 5 where we found ourselves at this hopeless place of just poor communication, unforgiveness, but when we were posed that question, we realized that we hadn't done everything. We hadn't gone to counseling. We hadn't tried to forgive each other. We hadn't been praying together, which is huge. It's one of the most intimate things you can do as a couple. And so once we started answering that question and unraveling that question in our lives, God's grace came in and he helped us get back to the marriage that we always hoped and dreamed of. It didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of work because we didn't get to that place overnight. So it took us some time to get where we had a strong marriage. And that's our hope for other people. That's why we wrote the book. We want other people to see, okay, this is what we did wrong. Here's some things we kind of did right, but here's some things we wish we would have known before we got married. Take these things, learn these things. Don't make the same mistakes we made. But if you do, here's some things to help you to get out of it.
Well, I think I certainly agree with you. You've got to come to that crossroads. Would you rather be right than happy? Okay.
Yeah.
Which is a tough question. I've done many years of marriage counseling since I became ordained. It was one of the areas that I got thrown into very, very quickly. And I actually start out with a tennis ball. And the couple sits down, and I throw the tennis ball to the groom-to-be. And I say, okay, for the next rest of your life, this tennis ball is your wife's heart. You are called to shepherd her heart. That means you can't be so busy you put it on the shelf and it collects dust. You're going to have to function 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with one hand occupied by a tennis ball that's going to represent your wife's heart. Everything you say, everything you do. And when I came to faith and I got called into ministry, I thought and was absolutely convinced that the highest calling of any individual was to preach the gospel of God and lead people into the kingdom. And I had a real wake-up call. And the real wake-up call was, as a man, my highest calling is to shepherd a woman's heart. It was what Adam's responsibility was, which is why God gave him the right to name his wife, because he was saying, this is a dominion mandate. You are to protect this and nurture it as you are to protect these animals, these fields, all that I've created, I'm putting you in charge of. And right now, your wife's heart is right there in your hand. And you can't throw it to the ground. You can't put it on the shelf. You can't leave it in the back seat of the car. Right? Everything you say and everything you do, you say, well, that's more than I bargained for. That's more than I thought marriage was. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think it's bearer of great news. You will find yourself a happy long-term marriage if you do that. So you ask him the question, are you willing to do whatever it takes to have the marriage that you've always dreamed of?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we have a clear understanding of God says, I will give you the desires of your heart.
Right.
In context, he is saying, I will place desires within you, and I will give you those desires. The fact that you want a yacht, the fact that you want a plane, the fact that you want an island mansion, those are your carnal desires. But we're talking about the spiritual desires of your heart. Do you think we have a clear understanding of what a marriage, have we created a framework in which we can create a dream, a marriage that we dream of, and send out this message, and you do that. You help craft. But is there such a thing as a marriage that we dream of? It's in the Bible, and it's kind of in a backwards way in the Bible. If you look at it technically, we see a description of the Proverbs 31 woman.
Yeah.
We never ask ourselves, who's the Proverbs 31 guy? Who's the guy that made her free enough, strong enough, support, encourage her enough that she might be seen in the community with respect? Who was the Proverbs 31 guy that was there lifting up her arms and supporting her so she could become the Proverbs 31 woman?
Right.
She didn't become the Proverbs 31 woman without having a Proverbs 31 man right there shepherding her heart so that she could become this icon, this example. So there had to be in that home, there had to be a certain environment, and that environment is an environment that we in this generation, and I'm going to throw this old white-haired guy into this generation because I'm using technology we're HDTV around the world. We're using this technology to reach the world. But lack of communication being one of the highlights of your book and a highlight of your counseling, I've seen couples at dinner texting each other across the table.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's interesting when we were asked to take on this role in marriage and parenting, we didn't want to assume that everybody had the same issues with communication that we did. We didn't know if everybody else was having these same challenges that we faced. We thought maybe everybody else has it together. And so we took a survey with about 15,000 people that are here in the church we had their emails that they were married. And we just sent out an anonymous survey just to find out about some things, just to kind of get an idea of what we were going to be dealing with. And one of the questions on it dealt with, what's the biggest challenge you're facing right now in your marriage? Yeah. And we listed out 6 or 7 different things, from communication to intimacy to finances. And we kind of wanted a list, give us your top 3. And what was unbelievable was that 98% of those that responded, they only put one answer. And their number one response was communication, that they had a challenge in. And I think a lot of it is because I think God created us so differently to complement each other, but yet how we take in information, how we process information, how we then give that information back out is so completely different from each other. Like, I'm amazed at how Ashley's mind works, because my mind doesn't work that way. We talk about in the book how a lot of times a woman's mind is almost like the backside of an entertainment center. This is how I visualize it, that everything's plugged in, from the TV to the cable box to the DVD player. But on the front side, it may be turned off, but really the power's still there. And I remember asking Ashley one day, I said, so you wake up in the morning and your mind's just going 100 miles an hour? And she was like, yeah, that's normal. And then I said, well, at night before you go to bed, your mind's going, thinking about all these different, well, yeah, I said, that would just stress me out to no end. I said, I've got a box for my family. I've got a box for my job, for the kids. And then I've got my favorite box, this nothing box that sometimes I like to get in and stay there for a while. But I think that deals with our communication, and how we do it, effectively is really setting each other up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, men and women are so different, and we talk a lot about that in the book. And God created us that way. There's a purpose for that. The things that used to frustrate me so much about Clayton are the things that I've learned to love, and some of the things that would frustrate me have actually helped me to become a better person. He's a very positive person. The cup is always half full. Well, for me, I'm more of a strategic thinker. So sometimes I'm always like, okay, I need a plan B, C, and D here. When he's like, well, just believe for A, but it's helped me. I mean, I'm still strategic, but it's helped me to be like, okay, you know what? I need to be a little bit more positive in this situation. Clayton's helped me with that. He's helped me to believe more. And whereas before that would frustrate me to no end, it's something now that really helps me because I've embraced our differences.
If you are the classic male-female, yeah. Ashley, I can already describe your most favorite moment in your marriage. And that is when you have something deeply inside of you that you want to share with Clayton, and all you want him to do is to listen to what you have to say. And right in the middle of it, Clayton comes to you with a solution. He's got the solution. Is that not your favorite moment of your entire marriage, when all you want him to do is be a listening ear? You don't want you don't want a solution, you don't want a suggestion, you don't want a logical response. All you want him to do is listen, right? We are not wired that way. We are wired to fix, to solve, to jump in. The moment that, what we hear is, I have a need, and the reason I'm telling you about it is because I need you to do something about it. And that message is not the message at all, but it seems to be the most common scenario that I hear is, my husband never listens to me. Well, what makes you think that? Because he cuts me off in the middle and he says, okay, well then I'll go out there and I'll do this, this, and this. Well, no. What he heard was, I have a problem that I need you to solve. Yep. You have to frame it in, Clayton, please don't confuse this for a conversation.
Well, actually, this is what we do. Because this was a big deal in our marriage. I'll never forget the day that he tried to fix all my problems and pulled over on the side of the road and told me to quit my job. And I just burst into tears. And I said, stop trying to fix all my problems. I just want you to listen. So to this day, before I tell Clayton something that's going on, I will say, okay, I just want you to listen. And he says, okay. And he just sits back, he listens. He knows I just want to say, you know what, it's going to be okay. He gives me a hug and tells me he loves me and gives me a kiss. Inside, I'm sure he's like, I know I could fix this, but that's not what I want. I just want him to listen. And he loves me enough to know that that's what I need in that moment. But sometimes there's times where I come to him and say, okay, I do need you to fix this one. Fix it. And he's like, oh yeah, let's do it. But most of the time I just want him to listen. And when he figured that out, that was amazing. I mean, we tell people that pretty much in every counseling session we do, the fix it and listen situation.
Yeah, if you could have helped me out about 20 something years ago, that could have been great, because
Yes.
I don't think I ever heard that, like, from my father or from my grandfather.
No.
Hey, listen, son, this is going to help you. Trust me. But trust me, I'm going to tell my 2-year-old son that, when he gets old enough, I'm going to let him know,
Absolutely.
listen, your wife, there's going to be times that you want to fix it. You want to be the knight in shining armor. You want to come in and save the day, but that's too big of a mantle. You don't have to worry about that. All she wants you to do is just tell her it's going to be okay, and just be a listening ear for her.
Absolutely.
A friend of mine sent me a video of a husband and wife in counseling, and the wife has a nail.
We've seen that.
You've seen that,
Yes.
right?
If you just get rid of that nail in your head, it'd be great.
Right.
Stop trying to fix my problems.
Yeah, right. It's not about the nail.
It's not about
It's not about the nail.
It's not about the nail.
That's so great.
There's so many great tools out there, and unfortunately we've got to go to break. We're talking with Clayton and Ashley Hurst. They are the and I want to get this right. They are the marriage and parenting pastors of 70,000 people. So I'm sure that your counseling schedule is quite robust. But they've written a new book which tells their story, how they took their own, and this is a transparent interview, takes you into the marriage of where it was broken, where it was cracked, where it needed help. But what comes out of it is not perfection. It's that light can only shine through a broken vessel. And when two come together with the Lord, even in our broken condition, the light can shine forward and we can find hope for a marriage and experiencing God's greatest desires for you and your spouse. We'll be right back with Clayton and Ashley Hurst after this break. Back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and today we're meeting with Clayton and Ashley Hurst, authors of Hope for Your Marriage, Experiencing God's Greatest Desires for You and Your Spouse. Clayton and Ashley, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You know, talk to me a little bit about this happily ever after myth. Once I go through counseling and we've got these strategic plans and these tactical plans, and when this happens, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to do the counting method. We're going to do the signal method. We're going to do the I'm not ready to talk just yet method. We're going to do the there's something I want to talk to you about, but I don't want a solution method. We're going to apply all these, and then we're going to be happily ever after, right?
No.
I think that's the way a lot of times the movies make it out to be, you know, from cartoons to the big romantic love stories. You know, you have this, knight coming in and sweeping up the damsel in distress, you know, and riding off into the sunset. And there's this image that, you know what, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
You know, we have all the warm and fuzzies on the inside, but I think what we realized, you know, literally a few days after saying I do, is that this is going to take a lot of work, you know, and I don't think we really saw that part of, and I don't think anybody really does, sees that part of the marriage as a model. I don't think a lot of times we don't see the books being read, the conferences that our parents maybe needed to go to, or maybe they went to. I don't know if we always see that modeled, that, you know what, there happily ever after is possible, but it's something that you have to work at every single day.
Yeah, I mean, anything that you do in life that's a success, you worked really hard to get there. So why wouldn't you work really hard at your marriage? If you want your marriage to be successful, you've got to put the work in to get it there. That's how you get to your happily ever after.
Yeah.
And that's what we realized. It wasn't just going to happen organically. We had to put the work and the effort into it. We had to learn the differences between men and women, the differences between us, how to show love to one another, realizing that love's not a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. I mean, we had to put in the work, and there's still days that we have bad days, but we have this one goal in mind. It's till death do us part. We're on the same team. We're not fighting against each other. We're fighting for our marriage. And that's our focus every day. And that's what gets us through the great times, and that's what gets us through the tough times.
When people finally grasp the fact that for this reason a man will leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one. When you divide one, okay, we know that when you split the atom, there's nuclear fallout. It's a nuclear explosion.
Yeah.
And the division of a marriage impacts so many. And it's sad that 50% of all Christian marriages are now ending in divorce. It's sad that 50% of all spousal abuse occurs in a Christian home. It's sad that 50% of all child abuse happens in a Christian home. There's tools out there. This book is a tool out there, but is this not like everything else, whether or not it's addiction, whether or not it is anxiety, depression, or anything else? You have to come to the reality that we're not where we're supposed to be. We have a problem, and we need to acknowledge the fact that things aren't working out right, and we need help.
I think that's huge. I think that's kind of your first step, in realizing that, even if you don't have the resources, you can make choices every day. You can do the things that you need to do to get better, to get stronger. I read something in a book one time that said that there are over 200 different choices that we make every single day that affect our physical well-being. Whether that's drinking water instead of having a Coke, whether that is, taking the stairs or the elevator, just all these little choices that a lot of times we don't even think will make a big difference. Well, the same happens in your marriage. The same happens in your relationships, that you can make these small, seemingly, we call them sparks, something small, seemingly insignificant, but man, they have potential to ignite something even greater, and so maybe it's the way I respond, and I know in the early days, even to this day, it's, am I going to choose to respond in love? Or am I going to respond in hate? Or am I going to respond with sarcasm? Or if I, whatever that normal might have been, I make that small choice, and it begins to change literally the atmosphere of our marriage, of what's going on every single day.
Yeah, humility plays such a big role in marriage too. Our pastor said recently, he said, humility is the first step to healing in any relationship. And that's so true. Every couple we talk to, we find that a lot of the root issues they have is pride. I don't want to give this up. I don't want to give that up. I don't want to, I want to go work out at the gym at 5 a.m. when my wife wants me to be at home. I mean, we just see so much of that being an issue in marriage, and the Bible's very clear on pride and humility. Pride comes before destruction, and an arrogant spirit before a fall. And then humility. If you humble yourself, the Lord will lift you up in honor. And that's so true. I mean, you can see that in society. You can see that in Hollywood. Pride always comes before a fall. And so we try to help couples understand that you have got to bring some humility into your marriage. You've got to be the first one to say, I'm sorry. In your marriage, you've got to humble yourself, because that's choosing love as well.
It's interesting that we build a house one brick at a time, laying a strong foundation. We destroy a marriage with a wrecking ball.
One brick at a time.
All right. We don't destroy a marriage one brick at a time. We hit it with a full-blown wrecking ball that brings a lot of destruction. And that destruction, you talk about pride, and the symptoms of pride are unforgiveness. The symptoms of pride are bitterness. The symptoms of pride are holding
selfishness.
Selfishness, of course. I'm seeing a rise in narcissism like I've never seen before. Well, that's enough about me. What about me? That I should get what I want. Look, you chose me. And it's so interesting because I hear men talk about their wives or wives talk about their women, and they're tearing them down, and I stop and say, then when this person who was so stupid, they chose you to be your spouse, what commentary are you making on this person that chose to marry you?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And they stop and think and say, well, maybe she wasn't so stupid after all. And, it's interesting. There's a couple of pioneers, John Trent being one of them, who has done some fabulous work. I go back to the movie that Jodie Foster was in called Contact. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, she was a young girl and her father operated a ham radio, and he was trying to reach outer space. Yeah. And she would sit on his lap, and he would let her touch the dial, and he would speak these words to her as she was spinning the dial trying to find extraterrestrial contact. He would say to her, small steps, Ellie, small steps. Yeah. Marriage is not going to be healed overnight. You didn't get to this point overnight. It's not going to get healed overnight. But it's the same way of driving to a destination and knowing you're going the wrong way and refusing to stop and turn around, figuring I can go the entire circumference of the globe and I'll eventually get there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The logical person would say, even if I head down the wrong path, I'll wind up in the right location based on time-space continuums and argue their position. In marriage, there has to be, and you talk about this in the book, you talk about mishandled conflict and how to handle conflict. Nowhere do you say that a happy marriage, a successful marriage, is conflict-free.
No, not at
never.
all. And I think that's something that we had to and still work on to this day. I think it's realizing that in a conflict, you're really trying to, you really need to kind of peel back the layers and get to the root of what you're trying to communicate. Because ultimately, there might be miscommunication. There might be the story behind the story, almost, of, okay, what exactly are you trying to say? What aren't you telling me? Because how you phrase this doesn't sound like that's everything. It's kind of like when you ask the question, honey, are you okay? I'm fine. And that's not really what it means.
They're fine. Never means we're fine.
Yeah. And so I think it's one of those things that you constantly work on. And it's probably different for every single couple, but you find that sweet spot. You find, okay, what's going to work for us? All, like you mentioned, all the different tools, all the different resources, the books, the conferences, the CDs, everything that you need to get great at your job, so to speak, at your task that you're trying to do. You try to get that, every bit of it, inside of you so that you can utilize it when you need it.
Yeah. And just realizing you're on the same team. You know what I mean? Like, we're on the same team. When we try, I mean, we obviously still make mistakes, but when we have a conflict, we always go into it saying, okay, we're on the same team here. We have the same goals in mind. Let's work through this rationally. Another rule we have is never in front of the kids. We're not going to ever get upset in front of the kids. We're going to do this behind closed doors. Of course, we do want them to see how we handle conflict because we didn't really see how our parents handled conflict. So we want them to see it as well, but we want to do it in a very rational way where it's showing love, even though we're trying to work through things. And you know what? There's times where we've had to go to other people for advice on things that we just don't agree on. And so we'll go to people that we trust and love to help us walk through that.
So having mentors is important.
Huge.
I think it's always important to reach back to help those that maybe they're not as far as you are in your marriage, but also it's so vital to reach forward and to find those that can speak into your life. Maybe, we have a couple that they've been married for about 5 to 10 years longer than we have. Their kids are older. They've been through a lot more than we have. So we glean from that, and then we have people like Ashley's parents, my parents, and others that, man, they've been married for 40, 50 years, and so you find those opportunities. Some of the greatest investments that we've made is a cup of coffee or a dinner out to say, can we just pick your brain?
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle this season? Because, marriage is just built up of a lot of different seasons, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's with the kids or whether that's in your early stages of marriage. How'd you make it through this season? What was this season like? What were some mistakes that you made? But also, what were some of your champion moments that we can glean from? I think that's
was one of the biggest mistakes we made at getting to year 5 was 2 years before that, Clayton became a pastor, and I didn't want him to take the job because I didn't feel qualified to be a pastor's wife. So that was probably one of our biggest fights because he took the job anyway, and we didn't really talk that through. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like because of the position we were in, we couldn't talk to anyone about what we were going through. And so I felt very embarrassed and very prideful, of sharing those things, fearing, the fear of man, of worrying what people would think about us. And that's one thing that we want to make sure couples don't do now. Don't ever not get help because of fear or worry of what somebody's going to think about you. Yeah. That's one thing that I love about our church. We have so many marriage classes. We have 3 ongoing marriage classes every weekend for just ongoing help that we attend as well and learn every week. We have 1 class for couples that are in crisis, and then we have 3 premarital classes. And our classes are very open. It's come and get help. We don't care what you're going through, what you've been through. And our teachers are incredible. I mean, they have been through it, and they are very open and vulnerable. It's a place where you can come and get help. It's a safe place where you can come and get help. And that was one of the biggest things on our hearts, is to make sure that our church provides that, because we didn't have that early on in our marriage.
And I think you can find that help wherever you are. I know your listeners and viewers are all over the world, and I think it's important to reach out to your wherever you worship. Find somebody that you can be a mentor to you. Find the resources that you need, whether that's classes in a local church, whether that's podcasts, whether that's
counseling. Go to counseling. Yeah. Don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. Go get counseling if you need it.
It's huge.
Marriage dynamic changes when children come into the picture.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But yet, there is a vision that I believe that God wants to have, and because He tells us, without a vision, the people perish. So you have to have a vision. If we were to adopt the view that we're not raising our sons and daughters, but we were raising future husbands, wives, mothers, and fathers.
Absolutely.
And we started out their lives with that perspective, that we are investing, making a deposit the same way we would in a 529 account, the same way we would in a savings account, the same way when we buy groceries, the same things we would invest in as far as basketball classes or tennis camp or whatever we would do, that we are raising future husbands and wives, future sons and daughters, and this is a stewardship. They are not your children. They are God's children, and He's placed you as the shepherds, because even the mother eagle dismantles the nest so that the kids don't stay.
Right.
We raise our children to leave.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think you prepare them. I think your analogy with the tennis ball is huge. We've got a 17-year-old daughter and 11-year-old daughter, and I've told my oldest, I've sat down with her before, and I've told her, I said, listen, my number one job as your father is to guard you and to help guard your heart, so that when I present you on your wedding day at the altar to your husband to be, that it is the most unscarred heart that possibly you can have. And so there's the so here's probably what a young man is thinking. Here's probably what's going through his mind. And we've even set up kind of some parameters as far as things like dating, with that specific in mind of here's what this is going to look like to help prepare you for marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're familiar with Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, the first scriptures that Jesus ever learned, about that, to love the Lord your God with heart, soul, mind, and strength. Talk about it with your kids. We're walking down the road, when you go to bed at night. Hang it up on your
post. Let me stop you there. not walking down the road. Okay, in the Hebrew, it's when walking on the way.
Walking on the way.
Walking on the way. When you're walking on the way. Now, what does Jesus declare? I am the way. When you look at the original Hebrew text, and we could talk about this for days, but I can, in the first 5 chapters of Genesis, I can give you the entire gospel story, the entire crucifixion story, and the entire birth story of Jesus, all in the first 5 chapters of Genesis, and it would blow you away. When we get to Deuteronomy, we get confirmation that it is Jesus that we are to walk with. We are to talk about Him when we walk along the way. He is the way, He is the truth, and He is the life, and no one comes to the Father but through Him. It was a pathway that God created. He reminds us of it in Jeremiah. When we come to the crossroads, choose the ancient path and walk along that way, and you will find your peace. It is such a complete picture of this understanding.
Those are some of the first scriptures we kids learn, and so we try to make it a point to talk about in the morning when we're getting ready for school, and in the evening, at bedtime. And for us, along the way, yes, is Jesus. But I think of our travels, we're in the car a lot. We try to talk to them in the car a lot when we're driving, but we also try to incorporate marriage into that too. What does it mean to honor? Does it mean to love your wife? We I didn't even realize their daughter was listening, and she just to write her English paper on that lecture for her class. And so she wrote about that. And anyway, her teacher, who was a middle teacher, loved the paper, and she was so proud of that paper that she did it to men and women.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're having a very hard end on not on our end, but on your end with your Wi-Fi connection, and I don't think that we have time to disconnect at this time. So I do want to thank both of you for joining us to talk about Hope for Your Marriage. Clayton and Ashley Hurst experience God's greatest desires for you and your spouse. Go to the ignitinganation.com webpage, click on Books and Media, scroll down to today's date, and order a copy for yourself. It will be a handbook for marriage resolution. It will be a foundation for any new couple starting out to be able to see what lies ahead and how they can avoid it, and give you a handbook that you will find to be of great benefit to your marriage. I don't know, Ashley and Clayton, if you can hear me, but thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth. We're going to take a short break. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.